But first, just because I think this is the way we do it, what would you give the score for this game?
I'd give it a 9 out of 10.
Okay.
Only mark... Well, we'll talk about that later on.
Okay. I was thinking 8.
Okay.
I did really enjoy it. Just narratively, there were a couple things, and the only reason I give it an 8 is because I try to compare it to my actual favorite games, like God of War and some of the Assassin's Creed titles.
Okay, and that's different for me because I really have nothing to compare it to other than the other Resident Evil games because I don't play anything.
Well, and like I like my movies or my games to feel like movies. Like that's just the way I like it. And this one did. It just there was a couple of parts where I was just like, didn't really need that.
Okay.
Not too much. It was very well fleshed out. And visually it's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think first before we get into the game we can talk about like the setting itself. Like this is like it's one area, but it spans out into different sections of one area, so it feels like an open world type of thing.
The village has very much Resident Evil 4 vibes.
Yes. Yeah, they said it was a mix of Resident Evil 4 and 7.
Yes, very much. So if you go back to Resident Evil 7 and you look at the Baker house, like each section is pretty much its own Baker house.
Yeah.
I hated the Baker house, but I loved it because it creeped me the fuck out.
Yeah.
There were a lot of things I didn't see coming that I enjoyed, but the cool thing about this was like I liked how the village was your like central hub.
Yeah.
There was always something new when you came back and you got to explore a little bit more after you like finished one of the main bosses. And there was always like a little something extra you could delve into and find, which was one of my favorite things about it. But aesthetically, it was fantastic.
There's an emotional, like sad, like tone throughout the whole thing. I think
it's a very depressing game.
Yeah.
Also, creators of Resident Evil hate Ethan's hands.
Yeah, his hands take a lot of damage.
In 7, his hand gets cut off.
Yeah.
In 8, his hand gets bitten in half.
Yeah, the fingers get cut off, and
his other hand gets cut off, and then he just goes, click.
Yeah, and they explain why that is.
Yes.
Which, at first I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, that was the moment in the game where I was like, this is gonna get super fucking cheese, isn't it? And it didn't. It's a Resident Evil is inherently cheesy.
Yep. Especially like lines.
Oh yeah. Speaking of lines, just real quick, the Duke. My favorite thing was the "What are you buying?"
Oh, just something one of my old friends used to say.
I was just like, that's fantastic. That's all I need.
Which I kind of wish they would have put the old merchant in it.
At least in a part.
Yeah, in a part or something.
I think that would have been cool.
Yeah.
I did like the idea that like he just roams around and pretty much follows you everywhere.
Yeah, and that's what the videos I was watching, the theories about why he's doing that.
Yeah.
Because he's a potentially like ruler of like a 5th house.
Which, I mean, I don't think they...
There's DLC's coming, so...
Ooh, yeah. And then they can bring the merchant in to sell you the rest of the shit?
Well, that, and then he could play a role in the next one too, who knows?
I mean, I'd be down.
Yeah.
So now, we'll break it down from pretty much beginning to end. As quickly as possible. So we start off with the Village of Shadows book, which kind of gives you a breakdown of what to expect in the game.
Yeah, which at first, when I first played, I was kind of like thinking, like, how is this going to connect? Because it was kind of off-putting, because you never seen something like that in a Resident Evil game before.
Yeah.
It was kind of Tim Burton-esque.
Tim Burton, or I don't know if you ever played Limbo.
No.
Visually,
okay.
Like that.
Because I know it was inspired by the Japanese, like, paper book stories or something like that. Yeah.
And it was... Visually, like it was really cool.
Yeah.
But it was very like taking more than you're like offered type of idea.
Yeah. And the story is read by Mia. Well,
yeah.
Mia, quotation marks.
Touche. I didn't think about that. So then we pretty much go to Ethan and Mia, kind of, though they're raising their daughter Rose
in Europe.
Yes, and Ethan's having problems with her being so nonchalant about everything that happened in Louisiana.
Yeah. Which there's a reason for.
Yes. Kind of makes you wonder what her attitude was like before the thing that happened. And how he wouldn't have noticed.
Yeah.
And we'll get to more of that in the future. But also, you get your first, like, what the fuck moment when all of a sudden after you put the kid to bed,
You go down there and you're about to eat dinner, and then shots fired.
Yeah, and you see Chris, and we've all seen it in the trailer, but Chris, they like blast Mia, and they take Ethan and Rose, and they like essentially kidnap them and give them no explanation, which was so dumb.
Yeah, and this is when you think like Chris is like a bad guy.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I never thought he actually was, because it's Chris Redfield. He's
a staple of the franchise.
He's Resident Evil Jesus.
Yeah.
I just that was one of the narrative things where I was like, really? You know how much time and bullshit you save if you just tell him what's going on? Especially because they already explained at the beginning that he spent months training with Chris Redfield. So he's not a liability, like.
Yeah, it just them not explaining it kind of helps with the twist at the end.
I mean, it definitely does. But it feels like it was written that way just to give the twist.
Yeah.
That's the only problem I have with it.
Which is kind of like, there's a few twists at the end, actually.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's at least 3.
Yeah.
But it was just one of those things that kind of bugged me, where I was like, you literally wrote yourself into a corner at the end to where you had to make this at the beginning.
And see, I really didn't look at it that way. I was just like happy that it was happening. I don't know.
I mean, I was happy that there was a Resident Evil game to play, so I was cool with that.
Yeah.
It feels like there's a smart way to go about things, and then Chris felt like a preteen boy who just like didn't want to give his like.
Because he made himself look like a bad guy the way he said sorry, Ethan. He didn't even say like, well, I'll explain later or whatever.
Even later when you're in like Moreau's area, he just seems like a dick, and you're like, dude, I'm just trying to help.
Just tell him to stay out of it and stuff like that.
You're out of your depth.
Yeah. And then after that, we essentially wake up on a crash site.
Yeah, because the thing they kidnap you in crashes and goes off road, and then you get your first.
You're walking through the dark and like trees and shit.
Yeah, you get your first glimpse into everything. When do we see our first lichen werewolf thing?
That's not until the first one I saw is you're going through the village, and is it right before you go into the house with the daughter and the dad? Like you're walking up that hill where the scarecrows are. That's when you see the first couple.
Yes, because like you have to go like over the gate.
Yeah, through the grass and shit. Yeah, that's where you see the first couple.
Okay, so you see it right after you like get to the church, and after you've made it through a bunch of the area, and you get your first gun and all that. Oh, yeah. It's right when your hand gets bitten off.
Yeah, and then before that, when you're walking from the crash site, you get to the cliff's edge, and you see the castle, and you see the village, you see everything.
Yes.
Yeah, and then you walk down into it.
And that was visually like dope, just to get to see that whole like expanse.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then you see how everyone in the village is on edge, and I think these are literally the only people from the village you meet that are alive the rest of the game.
Yeah, them, and then the people you go into in Louise's house.
Yeah, because that dad and his daughter, you bring them into Louise's house, thinking that you're saving them, and then shit goes down.
Yep.
Because the dad starts turning, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's starting to turn into one of the werewolves. And he takes everyone out. He hits that chick in the shoulder with that machete or whatever it was. Yeah. Takes her out first.
And that truck scene, I was like, it didn't really make sense to me. Especially after he hit the wall once and it didn't budge. I was like,
yeah, it's not going to budge the second time.
Don't do it again.
Yeah. And that chick is retarded too.
Yeah. There was no reason for her to die.
No.
It was dumb. I mean, I liked the fact that we didn't have baggage the whole time and have to like escort someone around.
Yeah, but like she shot her dad knowing that he wasn't her dad anymore, but then she tries to save him again anyway.
Yeah, that was
you already shot him once.
That was questionable.
Yeah.
At best. So then you escape from there, and I think this is where we start making our way to
the castle. Yeah, because you get the two emblems that you have to put in the door with the demon and that angel chick.
Yes.
That opens the door to go across to the castle.
Yes. And you see these like goats everywhere, and they're supposed to like symbolize like Mother Miranda protecting everybody.
Yeah.
And you kind of get your first glimpse of that once you start heading towards the castle, because you get introduced. So this is where your hand gets cut off, correct?
No, not yet.
Oh no.
You meet Heisenberg when you first get into the castle and you're about to work the elevator. You turn around, he's there, and then he captures you.
Yeah, captures you, knocks you out, brings you to their little meeting,
And you see the four lords.
yes, and Mother Miranda.
Yep.
You see Mother Miranda.